Dying Light 2 is the long-awaited sequel to the popular action role-playing survival horror game from Techland. The first trailer for this zombie open-world game debuted almost 4 years ago, and with so much anticipation, has it lived up to the hype? Here's our review of Dying Light 2. Fortunately, if like I, you didn't play the original, you're in luck. You don't need to have played it to play the second. As a small recap, the original game took place in the City of Harran, where there were ultimately no survivors. However, the global relief effort developed a vaccine for the Harran Virus to end the pandemic. Despite promises to cease all research, the GRE continued on in secret, and a mutated variant quickly spread. Over 20 years later, you play as Pilgrim named Aiden Caldwell, who travels between various settlements in this zombie-infested, post-apocalyptic world in search of your long-lost sister. During the opening moments of the game, Aiden is following a lead before being attacked by a zombie and consequently becoming infected. He's brought to the nearby city of Villedor, where he almost turns and the citizens attempt to hang him before being saved by a stranger and your new companion Hakon. This starts the main story as you play the errand and messenger boy for the different factions and citizens living in the politically tense city of Villedor. This RPG revolves around combat and parkour mechanics in a vast zombie-filled open world where you'll need to survive the city during the day and night with extremely contrasting environments. Your experience is influenced by the relationships you form and the people you cooperate with, impacting what's available to you and how the story unfolds. The citizens of Villedor have adapted to this zombie-filled existence by living on the rooftops of tall buildings. The trailers make it seem like wading through the streets is a fate worse than death. Honestly, it couldn't be further from the truth. It also created the impression that their utopia was a huge fortified paradise, but in most cases it's just a bit of scaffolding and plywood. Mind you, a lot of the structures aren't in place until you've done the hard work of securing the area for base camps to be set up. Overall, there's a nice story bubbling under the surface of the game that for me never really gets out of second gear. The game seems to get confused where to put its focus. You enter Villedor with your own agenda and reasons for being there before being dragged into a political conflict between its inhabitants. Every now and then the game reminds you that you're looking for your sister, with the occasional name drop or weirdly placed flashback from Aiden's childhood. Meanwhile, the zombies are just chilling in the background. Rather than being the focus of the game, they're just an obstacle to make your life difficult. Throughout the game you can opt to approach conversations in different ways with multiple dialogue prompts, but there's usually only one option that progresses you forward, with the rest being mere filler content. Occasionally you can make your own choices by siding with different factions and choose to act how you wish in dramatic scenarios. While you'd hope these decisions would make massive impacts on the story down the road, they don't really have an impact on the scale I was hoping for, at least not deeply enough for it to be noticeable. Some engagements that seem like a fight to the death are somewhat meaningless, as they seem to re-emerge moments later with a few cuts and bruises. But from a gameplay perspective, some of these choices will impact rewards you receive to aid you in your quest. For example, each faction will grant you unique bonuses depending on who you side with in certain scenarios. The survivors may put up more zip lines, making it easier to navigate the rooftops of Villedor, while the peacekeepers will set up car bomb traps to help demolish hordes of the undead. Where I got frustrated is the fact that the game tees up choices to divide its citizens and get you to pick sides, but because they don't massively impact the game, you're not too bothered by what side you pick. These decisions should always play on your conscience and make you draw a line in the sand, but I never felt even remotely conflicted by my choice. It's also hard to want to side with anyone when betrayal is so rife, usually happening with the same set of characters all within the span of 30 minutes. In one scenario, I went from being Sophie and Barney's best friend, to their enemy they wanted to kill, to their ally, and then their enemy once again, before coming to an agreement to work together. Dying Light 2's gameplay is by far the crown jewel. I can't sing its praises enough in terms of ease to pick up and pure enjoyment. There's not a lot to it. Run, smash, grab, and run some more, keeping it fun and to the point. The parkour system in Dying Light 2 is remarkably fun and engaging. Where in most games travelling from A to B is tedious, there's so many ways to travel across Villedor, you always need to be paying attention and calculating where you'll jump to next. Everything is climbable, and when I say everything, I mean everything. The movement isn't limiting in any way as long as you have the precision and idea you can do it. This is only enhanced later in the game as your stamina bar becomes more effective, allowing you to climb and hang for longer. I will say that it comes with some flaws that could be ironed out. At times you'll experience a delayed effect that can cause you to question whether you have actually grabbed something. I feel like the inputs from the mouse were delayed just enough to cause an issue, and when you paired it with some of the off-putting camera effects, it really left you frustrated at times. While keyboard inputs register well, the animation times seem to take far longer than necessary, as you catch some uncomfortable airtime waiting to latch onto a zipline. It meant on more than one occasion I would press the spacebar too many times, thinking I hadn't latched on, and Aiden would consequently fall to his death. It's a stark contrast from its combat, which was undeniably bland due to the lack of weapon choice and the variety in combat. Not to mention that the enemy AI were far from the sharpest. Most fights came down to aimlessly swinging a blunt instrument and occasionally blocking when necessary. As you get better in combat, you unlock skills such as the jump kick that makes things more interesting, but also even easier. The progression system and skill tree doesn't do anything out of the ordinary, but it's a big part of the game and how you'll get better, stronger and faster. Just by running around like a headless chicken, you'll gain parkour experience to help rank up. Likewise, scrapping with enemies will help your combat skills grow faster. Looting until your heart's content is a favourite pastime of mine, with ample opportunities to do so. Admittedly, sometimes it's easier to buy objects in order to grow stronger, although you'll pay extortionate prices and typically anything you sell is worth nothing. Much like the first game, there's a day and night cycle. During the day, things are extremely straightforward as you jump around the roofs of the vibrant environments. There are far fewer zombies kicking around, and those that are there are fairly docile. However, once night comes around, stronger and trickier types of zombies start to surface and flood the streets and even the rooftops. Should you be unlucky enough to set off a chase sequence, you'll wish you hadn't. Of course, these sequences can be ended by reaching a safe zone. Alongside this, it brings the immunity system. Now, because Aiden is infected, he must stay in the light to stop himself from turning, which makes travelling at night a real pain, to the point I would avoid being out at night almost entirely unless it was necessary for the story or missions. Admittedly, this idea is only really inconvenient in the early stages of the game because you're unfamiliar with your surroundings and the time restraint feels more pressing than it actually is. As you progress through the game and unlock more settlements, more safe zones will appear around the city, giving you more options to retreat and stay safe. Dying Light 2 is absolutely stunning to look at, there's no denying that fact. It's one of the most visually pleasing games that I've seen for some time. From the very moment you boot up the game, the environments are filled with beautiful detail and astonishing lighting effects that set a brilliant atmosphere. It's almost euphoric in what should be a time of disaster and despair. If I got high enough into the city, I'd stop and stare at what was in front of me, all with beautiful frame rates that never really drop. Let's not forget about the expertly crafted sound. The ambient noises are eerie, creepy, scary, and so satisfying if you enjoy getting your heartbeat pumping. While I'll praise Techland for this contrasting and conflicting set of emotions flowing through me in the first hour or two, the atmosphere is quickly U-turned due to the fact that the zombies no longer become the focal point of the game, but rather something going on in the background. Other than a few scenarios inside the walls of Villedor, the atmosphere never really reaches the same heights as the opening few hours of gameplay. Dying Light 2 is an interesting concept for a game that's hindered by the fact that every time the game started to pick up, it never took that momentum and ran with it. The tone established early on didn't seem to carry out through the game, as the story's focus shifts away from the main reason for being to focusing on a politically torn city, where it never really does a lot to push the boundaries of controversy and forgetting about the zombie inhabitants almost entirely at times. While I firmly believe there is a lot of room for improvement, Dying Light 2 gets the basics right, a good gameplay experience with plenty of value for money. If you're a fan of the first Dying Light, RPGs and co-op games, this is a must-have. If you don't fall into those categories, my advice is to watch some playthroughs first and consider what other titles you're interested in before pulling the trigger. To check out more Dying Light 2 content and read our full review, be sure to head over to rockat.com.